Hello friends, I'm very happy to see you here. Today I want to tell you a story that sounds so unusual that many people first think it must be a myth or an exaggeration told by travelers. Imagine a country where divorce is not always seen as a tragedy, a place where a woman, after separating from her husband, does not hide from society, does not feel shame, and does not disappear from public life. In fact, sometimes the opposite happens. In some parts of Mauritania, divorce can mark the beginning of a new chapter. And in certain towns and communities, there is a social tradition that travelers often describe as one of the most unusual markets in the world. A place where divorced women gather, meet people, and sometimes start new relationships. Of course, it is not a market in the literal sense. No one stands behind a counter selling anything. But the atmosphere is similar to a marketplace. Crowded streets, vendors selling spices and fabrics, the smell of mint tea in the air, conversations, laughter, and hundreds of people walking slowly between the stalls. And among them, you can often see women wearing beautiful traditional clothing, walking confidently through the market, talking with friends, laughing, and sometimes exchanging curious glances with strangers. To understand how such a tradition could exist, we first need to understand the country itself. Mauritania lies in West Africa, between the Atlantic Ocean and the vast sands of the Sahara Desert. Much of the country is covered by desert landscapes that seem almost endless. Huge dunes, isolated towns, and ancient caravan routes that once connected North Africa with the regions south of the Sahara. For centuries, many of the people living here were nomads. They moved across the desert with their camels and livestock, following water sources and grazing land. Their lives were closely tied to caravan trade routes that carried salt, gold, fabrics, and spices across the desert. When caravans stopped near wells or oases, it became a major social event. People exchanged news, traded goods, told stories, and sometimes met people they had never seen before. Over time, markets and gathering places became important centers of social life. But Mauritanian culture also has another interesting characteristic that surprises many outsiders. In some traditional communities, women historically held a relatively strong social position. They could own property, keep certain gifts they received during marriage, and sometimes return to their families after divorce, without losing their social standing. This meant that divorce did not always destroy a woman's reputation. Sometimes it simply meant that a relationship had ended, and that life would continue. Because of this, divorced women in some communities remained very visible in public life. They attended celebrations, weddings, gatherings, and of course, evening markets. And this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because on these evening markets, when the desert heat begins to fade and the air becomes cooler, the streets fill with people. Traders open their stalls. Lanterns begin to glow. The smell of spices and grilled food fills the air. And among the crowd, you can notice women wearing bright traditional garments called melhafa. These long flowing fabrics wrap around the body and head in elegant folds. The colors can be incredibly vivid: deep blue, emerald green, gold, pink. Women wear bracelets, rings and earrings that softly reflect the light of lanterns. They walk slowly through the market, talking and laughing. And sometimes, new stories begin there. But to truly understand why such a tradition developed, we need to look deeper into the social history of Mauritania. And that is exactly what we will talk about next. To understand this tradition better, we need to imagine life in the desert societies of the Sahara. For centuries, many communities in Mauritania lived as nomads. Their lives were constantly moving, following water sources, pastures, and trade routes. In such environments, adaptability was essential for survival. Families were extremely important, but social systems were also flexible in certain ways. Marriage was valued, but if a relationship did not work, separation was not always seen as a complete failure. In some communities, a woman who returned to her family after divorce could still maintain respect and support from relatives. She might keep personal belongings or gifts that had been given during the marriage. And in some cases, she would simply begin a new chapter of her life. This cultural attitude created a situation that surprised many foreign visitors. A divorced woman could still be socially active, respected, and visible in community life. She attended gatherings, celebrations, and markets, and sometimes she could marry again. Some travelers even wrote that in certain regions, women might marry more than once during their lifetime without this being considered unusual. In fact, it sometimes showed that a woman had experience and maturity. Evening markets became natural places for people to meet. After sunset, when the desert air cooled, streets filled with life. Traders arranged their goods, fabrics, spices, jewelry, and food. People gathered in small groups drinking sweet mint tea. Music could sometimes be heard from nearby gatherings. Women walked through the markets in groups, talking with friends. Men also gathered nearby, discussing news, or simply observing the lively scene. Sometimes conversations began naturally. A greeting, a question, a shared laugh. Most of the time, these were simply friendly interactions. But occasionally, such conversations grew into something more. A friendship, a relationship, or eventually, a new marriage. There is another detail that surprises many visitors. In some communities, divorce could even be followed by a small gathering or celebration. This was not a celebration of separation itself. Rather, it symbolized that life was continuing. A woman might wear beautiful clothing, invite friends, prepare tea and sweets. People would talk, laugh, share stories, and show support. It was a reminder that even after difficult moments, life does not stop. There may always be another beginning. For travelers who first encounter this tradition, it can seem very unusual. But when viewed within the cultural context of Mauritania, it becomes easier to understand. It reflects a different perspective on relationships, community, and resilience. And it shows how societies can adapt their traditions to the realities of life. But Mauritania today is also changing. Modern cities are growing. Young people are studying abroad. Technology and social media are transforming how people communicate. And this brings us to the final part of the story. Today, Mauritania is gradually changing. Cities are expanding. Universities are growing. Young people communicate through phones and social media. And like in many other countries, modern life is transforming traditional customs. Yet many cultural traditions still remain alive. Evening markets are still important social spaces. People come not only to buy goods, but to meet friends, share news, and spend time together. When the sun sets and the heat of the desert begins to fade, the streets slowly fill with life. Lanterns illuminate the stalls. The smell of grilled food and mint tea spreads through the air. Voices, laughter, and conversation blend into the rhythm of the evening. Women wearing colourful melhafa walk slowly through the market. The fabric moves gently in the evening breeze. Bracelets softly ring when they lift a cup of tea. They talk with friends, laugh, and observe the life around them. And sometimes, among the ordinary movement of the market, something unexpected happens. A conversation begins, two people meet, a story starts. For many visitors, this atmosphere feels unique because the market is not only a place of commerce, it is also a place of possibility, a place where human connections are formed, where people from different families and backgrounds meet, and sometimes where new chapters of life quietly begin. Modern life may change the way people meet, but the spirit of community gatherings remains. Markets continue to serve as social centers where life unfolds in small, meaningful moments. And perhaps this is the real lesson behind this story. Different cultures view life's transitions in different ways. What one society may see as an ending, another may see simply as a turning point. In Mauritania, divorce does not always mean the end of a story. Sometimes it simply means that a new chapter is about to begin. And when lanterns light the evening markets and people gather to talk, laugh, and share tea, somewhere in that ordinary moment, a new path may begin for someone. A new friendship, a new relationship, a new life story. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next story.